So welcome everybody. Very interesting topic today with Daudi Mugabe from Uganda, the CXA in Uganda. Great job in setting that up. On the topic of basically empathy and psychological health of frontline employees. We all know that frontline employees can sometimes be in a very hard position, having to defend actions by the company that the customers may not like. Customers sometimes being very unfriendly and unhelpful. So they're always a little bit squeezed between a rock and a hard place. And very much looking forward to Daudi sharing some of his insights on this topic with us today. As always, we love to see some questions, which we will collect at the end. So for now, I'd say, Daudi, take it away. The floor is yours.
Okay, fantastic. So welcome once again, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today to share with you this particular topic, compassion fatigue when helping hearts and addressing the mental health risks of frontline customer service. So to start off with, I just wanted to introduce myself. Today's webinar is a topic that is very close to my heart and one that I believe doesn't get the attention that it duly deserves, and that's compassion fatigue. So my name, as already mentioned, is Daudi Mugabe. I am currently serving as the Corporate Affairs Manager at a statewide insurance company that's based here in Uganda. And before I worked in the insurance industry, I worked as a customer service representative in various roles that gave me first-hand insight into the emotional demands of the frontline officers. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. I started out as a call center agent for an internet service company called DataNet here in Uganda, where I handled everything from upset customers, unhappy about outages, to those that were confused, struggling with the basic troubleshooting. And then later on, I worked for Cytel in the UK. This was a customer center agency which gave me the experience of managing calls on behalf of different companies that included banks, appliance companies, and also insurance companies as well. So each day in these particular roles was unique and challenging, and it also was packed with experiences that were both good and bad. And that is what we want to talk about today, especially those that have an adverse effect on the psyche or the mental well-being of those that serve in these frontline positions. So these experiences gave me a deep understanding and appreciation for how rewarding and draining the frontline customer service can be. And so today I am just here to share with us how this particular work requires a balancing act, and those that perform in these roles are expected to bring their best to each and every interaction that they have with customers, regardless of what's going on in their personal lives and regardless of what kind of day that they're having. And unlike machines, human beings simply can't reset when their emotional energy is down. And that's where this particular concept of compassion fatigue comes into play. So today I wanted us to explore this particular issue, not that I am a mental health professional, I am not, but as someone who's worked in these particular shoes, I just wanted us to discuss this topic of compassion fatigue and how to spot it, its impact, and most importantly, what we can do to manage its effects as individuals and also as the teams. So to start us off, I just wanted us to briefly look at the mental health risks in customer service. Customer service roles, they come with a unique mental health risk. A big part of this stems from what researchers call the emotional labor. Basically, the effort required to manage your own emotions while at the same time navigating the emotions of others. A study done by Becker and Demerti in 2007 in a journal of organizational behavior found that employees in roles requiring high emotional labor are significantly more likely to experience burnout and stress-related disorders. For instance, I mentioned that I worked in Cytel, and some of my colleagues at Cytel handled calls from bank customers reporting their accounts being hacked or fraud. And some of these conversations were deeply emotional calls that often filled with panic and in some cases anger. And so as we handled these calls, we had to remain calm, we had to be empathetic, and also solution focused, even if we were dealing with repeated verbal abuse. So over time, this kind of interaction with employees in a sustained period of time, it takes its toll on the frontline customer service team. And I remember one colleague, his name was James, who started out as an enthusiastic call center representative, but eventually he became withdrawn and irritable over time. And statistics back this up. A survey in 2020 by Forbes found that 74% of customer service representatives experience significant work-related stress, and up to 30% report symptoms of anxiety or depression. In addition to that, women in customer-facing roles reported higher rates of emotional exhaustion, and that was according to a study in 2019 by the International Labour Organization. And just to add to this, during my time within the insurance industry where I currently serve, I once had an experience managing a claim involving a building that caught fire. It was a laboratory of sorts that caught fire, and the customer was obviously distraught. But during our interaction back and forth while we resolved their issue, I couldn't shake off the emotional weight of the conversations that we had with this client who had basically lost their business in a fire, and obviously a loan that they had taken out in the millions of dollars had gone up in flames. So having to calm them down and interact with them back and forth, that was one of the moments where I personally had to deal with this compassion fatigue. So I now wanted us to just get into some detail of defining what exactly compassion fatigue is. So what is it? In essence, compassion fatigue, sometimes referred to as the cost of caring. It's the physical, emotional, and psychological toll that comes from providing consistent empathy, often in high stress and high emotion environments. And this is where most of our frontline customer service personnel sit. It's a phenomenon that goes beyond just physical exhaustion, extending into emotional depletion and numbness. It's often seen in healthcare, social work, and of course, customer service roles where individuals interact on a daily basis with people experiencing levels of stress, frustration, or disappointment. Now, it's helpful for us to differentiate between compassion fatigue and similar concepts like burnout and empathy fatigue. So I just wanted to give us an overview of what these other two concepts are. So burnout typically refers to the general physical and emotional exhaustion that we feel from prolonged work-related stress, often across any profession. A customer service representative may start feeling overwhelmed by the relentless pace of handling complaints, and this leads them to dread coming to work or feeling physically drained even after a sufficient amount of rest. So that's burnout. Emotional fatigue, on the other hand, is more specific to feeling of emotional depletion from engaging deeply with others' emotions. For example, a customer service agent at a telecommunications company who frequently interacts with customers that share personal struggles such as financial difficulties, causing them missed payments and things like that. Over time, such an agent might find it harder to feel compassion for these situations, instead feeling emotionally distant as they have to be overwhelmed and deal with one problem after another. So how does compassion fatigue compare to burnout and empathy fatigue? Compassion fatigue is a combination of the two, specifically tied to the repeated need to provide empathy and care. It's particularly challenging for those in roles that regularly require interactions that involve facing or dealing with people that are going through hardship or frustration. And so we have emotional cups that get drained every day. And so people that work in these roles find that they are pouring from those cups time and time again. And over a period of time, they find themselves with less and less to pour out of their cup until such a point when there is absolutely nothing to pour from their cup. And you can consider a customer service agent who maybe handles claims for a major insurance provider. And imagine that each day they speak to people who have experienced a car accident, a fire, or loss of a loved one. Over time, such an agent begins to feel an emotional weight, not only because of the sheer volume of cases that they have to deal with, but also from the amount of empathy that they have to provide to each and every customer that they come in contact with. And eventually this cumulative empathy that they have to deal with results in compassion fatigue that we are talking about. And this inevitably has an impact on their mental health. At this juncture, I wanted us to explore some of the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue. Recognizing these signs is essential because it can help us intervene and prevent escalation into more severe mental health challenges that these frontline staff might face. So I wanted us to delve into some of the symptoms and signs and see what we can look out for when trying to identify what these problems are and how we can solve them. The first one is emotional exhaustion. This isn't the typical tiredness that a good night's sleep can fix. Emotional exhaustion feels like you're running on empty no matter how much rest you get. For instance, a customer service agent who starts the day dreading interactions with customers and feels increasingly overwhelmed after each call may be emotionally exhausted. So over time, you find that such an employee or agent starts to dwell even the smallest tasks, which in their case might feel insurmountable because of the emotional exhaustion that they have. And then the next one is irritability. This one normally shows up in agents who interact with both customers and colleagues. An example could be an agent who once calmly handled tough calls, suddenly snapping at customers for minor mistakes or becoming visibly frustrated with team members, and it's very irritant to the smallest of inconveniences. This irritability is not necessarily a lack of professionalism, but might sometimes be a symptom of someone that is just simply emotionally depleted. Another one which I personally experienced in my roles at the frontline was numbness or detachment. And this symptom is often described as going through the motions, where an agent might deliver robotic responses, avoiding genuine emotional connection during interactions. And I have personally experienced this, particularly with the internet service provider that I worked with in my first role as a frontline customer service agent. We had an outage with our internet satellite. We were doing VSAT internet connections, and several clients would call asking what exactly the problem is and how soon it would be rectified. Because I didn't know, I didn't have the information from the NOC team, the Network Operating Center team, I was stuck with some sort of script to tell the customers. And at first, I was very empathetic because many of them weren't able to get their work done. But over time, as the calls kept coming in, I became more and more detached from their emotions and whatever pain they were going through, which in turn made me communicate in a robotic or non-empathetic way as I was going through a script, simply trying to answer their queries. And then the last one, which is very related to the numbness, is reduced empathy, perhaps the most damaging symptom of all, because reduced empathy manifests as diminished ability to care about the customer's concerns. For example, as I had mentioned before, a service rep might dismiss a customer's frustration over something like a billing error, seeing it as just another problem. And this lack of empathy undermines the trust that can be escalated, which might lead to conflicts or escalation into another issue that we might not necessarily require. And so those are some of the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue that we can look out for. There's emotion exhaustion, irritability, numbness or detachment, and lastly, the reduced empathy from the staff at the front line. What impact does this compassion fatigue have on service quality and employee well-being? Well, it has an impact on service quality in quite a number of ways. Its effects go far beyond just the individual well-being, and sometimes they ripple out to impact teams and customers at large and the broader organization inevitably. And so I just wanted us to explore these in terms of various concepts. The first one being its impact on the actual service quality. So when frontline staff suffer with compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue, they have reduced patience and empathy, as I had mentioned earlier. So agents experiencing this particular phenomenon tend to rush through their phone calls and sometimes fail to actively listen to customers. They simply look out for buzzwords that they are familiar with or that are in their script and perhaps miss out on a few nuances that they need to consider to effectively solve the problem. For instance, an irritated customer seeking clarity on an insurance policy might feel dismissed if the agent handling their problem interrupts or provides surface-level responses to end that phone call or interaction as quickly as possible. So such interactions lead to poor customer satisfaction, especially when they have to be rated after the phone call or after a particular period of time, which in the long term lowers the scores of that of the business. And this also has an impact on increased errors and oversight. Fatigue affects the focus of the staff at hand, making it easier for them to miss critical details. I recall a particular case at Citel where one of our colleagues was suffering from compassion fatigue and forgot to update a customer's bank details while they were engaging them on the call. And this minor oversight, it led to payment details being delayed, and that escalated into further complaints, creating additional stress for the team in general and the organization that we're representing, which inevitably frustrated the customer because this was something that could easily have been dealt with. But the fatigue from the emotional weight that the agents were facing led to that minor error being made. And I just also wanted us to look at the impact on the employee well-being. On the employee well-being, it has various effects. For example, the team dynamics are affected. Emotion exhaustion can spill over, creating tension among team members. One disengaged or irritable agent can lower morale across the entire team, And this, of course, has a ripple effect, leading to a cycle of negativity amongst the entire team as they, in turn, handle their various customer engagements. It also has mental health issues, as I've highlighted. If unchecked, compassion fatigue can escalate into chronic stress, anxiety, or even, in worst case scenarios, depression. During my stint in the insurance industry, I saw quite a number of colleagues struggle with such issues, leading to many of them taking extended leave and others having to leave the job entirely. I spoke with a few members in claims who normally receive phone calls directly from clients, and one of them that left the job said they had reached their toll when they were receiving phone calls in the middle of the night, phone calls from clients who were saying, "I've just been in an accident, I have lost my brother, how can you help me?" So receiving phone calls like that in the middle of the night, time after time, sometimes has its toll on our frontline staff, which in turn might lead to things like a turnover and them leaving the organization in general. So now that we've seen some of these challenges, what can we do to mitigate compassion fatigue? How can we try and resolve these issues? The three areas that I wanted us to focus on. The first one is for the individuals. Here are some of the ways that we can help individuals deal with compassion fatigue. The first one is to set boundaries. As individuals, we need to learn to step away when needed. Taking regular breaks in between challenging phone calls at work can have wonders. I particularly like to do this when I am dealing with particular clients, especially when there are multiple phone calls back and forth. When you're handling difficult customer interactions, it certainly helps to step off the desk and engage with anything that is outside work. And taking a walk, at least for me personally, has helped out emotionally to manage these particular issues effectively. So setting boundaries is one way that we can do that. The second is to engage in self-care. Physical and emotional health go hand in hand. So activities like exercising and practicing mindfulness, or simply spending time with loved ones can help us recharge our emotional reserves. And there are also apps these days that can help with these apps that we can use within a short period of time, like Calm and Headspace, which can help us with mindful exercises that we can fit easily within our busy schedules. The third one, of course, is leaning on peer support. During my period in time working on the frontline customer service help desk, I found that talking with colleagues who understand the particular challenges that I am going through was cathartic. Whenever we would engage in such conversations, ideally during a coffee break or a lunch break, these interactions turned out to be therapy sessions of sorts, where we vented and sometimes laughed about some of the difficult challenges that we're going through. And that in turn helped us manage these particular stresses better. So that's how we can help individuals to deal with these particular challenges. What about organizations? For organizations, certainly we can provide mental health resources. I read somewhere that companies like Salesforce offer wellness programs, including access to therapists and stress management workshops. And these initiatives obviously not only help employees cope, but also show them that the organization values their well-being over and above the productivity or the bottom line of the organization. And the other one, of course, is to encourage rest and recovery, allowing our employees to take mental health days or offering flexible schedules depending on the individual needs that they have can reduce burnout. I also read somewhere that Zappos actively encourages its employees to log off early during particular stressful periods, and to also prioritize their mental health over productivity. So for organizations, these are just a few measures that they can take to help their frontline staff deal with compassion fatigue. And now, what about the leaders within the organization? What can they do, those that are directly supervising the frontline staff or those slightly above? As leaders, of course, we can model wellness practices. We set the tone for those that follow us. And so when we as managers openly prioritize our well-being, like taking healthy breaks or acknowledging stress of our employees and juniors, it normalizes these behaviors for the team. Another one is to regularly check in. When we schedule frequent one-on-one meetings just to gauge how our team members are feeling and not just necessarily performing, these conversations help them feel better, especially when we ask open-ended questions like what has been the most challenging moment for you this week, or which customer is giving you the highest anxiety. And when we actively listen to their concerns, this interaction in itself helps them try and combat the anxiety or compassion fatigue that they might be feeling. The other one, of course, is to implement team rituals. Simple practices like end-of-day debriefs at the weekly team meetings or daily team meetings, they foster some sort of camaraderie with the team. And I remember at Cytel, where I used to work, we used to have team meetings every week just to find out how we are doing, to engage ourselves, and just some 5 minutes of deep breathing exercises. This helped us, at least before hitting the phones, psychologically prepare and become more ready for whatever it was to come. So those are some tips that we as leaders can focus on as we try to combat this particular challenge of compassion fatigue. So to wrap it all up, in today's session, we've explored the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, and that included emotional exhaustion, irritability, reduced empathy, and we also looked at how those can impact individuals and teams. We then looked at the far-reaching effects of compassion fatigue on service quality and the employee well-being, and this included things like errors that might arise out of these scenarios, reduced customer satisfaction, and also strained team dynamics, and in worst case scenarios, departure of staff from these particular roles. And then we also looked at mitigation strategies to combat compassion fatigue. We looked at those from the individual point of view, like self-care. We had a look at those from the organizational point of view, like providing therapeutic support to these staff, and also from the leadership point of view, which included frequent engagement of the staff members and also setting of the tone by actively taking breaks ourselves and bringing our best selves to work. And so, as I wrap up, as customer service professionals and customer experience professionals, we are the heartbeat of our organizations. And by being the heartbeat of our organizations, our work touches lives every day, often in ways that go unnoticed. And to continue delivering exceptional service for our customers, we must take care and we must take note of how we feel as individuals and how our teams feel emotionally. So to all the leaders on the call today, I just wanted to urge you, as I summarize, to prioritize the mental health of your frontline workers and to try and create a culture within your organizations that values the well-being of your frontline staff as much as it does their performance. And to everyone on the call, don't ignore the signs that we've looked at today. When you feel depleted, please take note and take time to recharge your batteries. Sometimes we think we are Superman, so we try to do as much as we can, even when we emotionally can't. But this has dangers to it. So we must take note and advocate for the support that we need. And lastly, I just wanted to end with a quotation by Eleanor Brown that basically wraps up everything that we've discussed, and that is simply that you cannot serve from an empty vessel. So let's make sure that our emotional vessels are full and ready to give and pour out to those that need our compassion and emotion. And when we prioritize our mental health and well-being, we don't just improve the workplace, but rather we create an environment where we can truly make people feel heard, valued, and cared for. So together, let's commit to building a healthier, more compassionate service culture that delivers the best experience both internally and externally. So that is my presentation today on compassion fatigue, and I look forward to hearing from the listeners. Thank you very much. Back to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Dowdy. Great topic, great presentation. We have some questions in the chat. I have a question myself as well, but I'll start with what's in the chat. Right. First of all, do you think that current contact center KPI targets generally help drive compassion fatigue? I think everybody's probably nodding their head vigorously, but I'll leave it to you to give the official answer.
All right. So do I answer that, or do I take more? You can guide me.
No, answer it. I'll come up with. I'll come with the next questions once you've answered.
Okay. So just to recap, the question was: do the current KPIs and targets for the frontline support in any way help with the compassion fatigue?
Do they actually cause compassion fatigue?
Do they cause? Okay. I would argue that yes, I do believe most of these targets do cause compassion fatigue because they are numerical metrics. For instance, where I used to work in Cytel, one of the measures of how well you are doing as a call center agent is how many calls have you answered. And so it's easiest to look at the quality of call that you've had with a customer and looks more at the quantity of calls that you've had. So you find yourself where there is need for you to take time and emotionally engage with a customer to make sure that by the time they hang up, they feel satisfied. You are rushing to go through the script or to fix their problem and get to the next call. That way your KPI looks good and your supervisor feels that you're not just slacking off on the job and just having chit chat with the customer, but rather working. And so just from my personal point of view, through my experience, I feel like many of these KPIs sometimes lead to compassion fatigue. Of course, I'm sure there are organizations that have measures to mitigate that, but by and large, majority of them drive this compassion fatigue.
Yeah, I'm afraid many do not have ways of countering that. The thing is, of course, you feel under pressure. You know that you're not doing your customer a good service because you're rushing through it, and you get into a bit of a negative spiral there. Stefan, you had a question.
Yes, amazing topic. Thank you so much, Dowdy, for the wonderful presentation and for bringing this topic to our attention. I had so many thoughts about my own time as leading a customer support organization, where many of our agents were in low-cost countries like India and other places. This is 15 years ago, and they had to deal with a lot of xenophobia and racism and people already getting very angry, mostly North American customers, when they heard an Indian accent or a foreign accent on the phone. And the emotional fatigue and stress for the agents was enormous. But my question is, about what you said, how agents would receive calls in the middle of the night. I think as leaders, we must also help by building an infrastructure that allows employees to have boundaries. To your example, it should never be possible that the customers have the personal phone number and get a hold of agents individually outside of their working hours. This is not the agent's fault. This is definitely the corporations, the organization's fault of not having set up boundaries. My question is on a second topic, how do you think policies and emotional fatigue relate? If I'm a very harsh insurance and I'm very strict on not paying on claims and being very restrictive on being customer centric, do you think that adds stress to customers when to agents when their hands are bound and they can't deliver good service to customers? Would that add to the stress that we spoke about today?
Yes, absolutely, and that comes through mostly in an industry like maybe insurance, where someone has gone through a horrific experience, and perhaps you, as the agent interacting with this customer, you feel their pain, but because of a fine print on the policy, their claim cannot be paid. And so communicating that or having to deal with that as the person that, in quote, is on the customer's side delivering that news sometimes can weigh its toll on you, especially if it happens time and time again. Of course, the argument by some of these companies is that you must communicate the fine print prior to taking on the service. So sometimes, indeed, there is the ball is dropped at that point where the clients aren't sensitized properly at the beginning of their insurance journey. But I've seen it where it's very difficult to tell a client we can't help you in a scenario where you can clearly see emotionally they're very, very disturbed.
Thank you. Thank you.
To add to that, a further perspective or a slightly different perspective, we worked with the contact center of one of the largest German automotive companies, and we saw that there was a lot of stress amongst agents because there were a lot of bad things happening out there, and people called and immediately started shouting. Once we managed to sort things a little bit better and there was less shouting at the agents coming from the outside, immediately the sick leave reduced, the churn of agents reduced. So it's actually a lovely case for the ROI of why is good CX good for the company, not just because you have happier customers, but you also get happier agents. Abdul, you've been having your hand up for a while. Abdul,
Lovely.
you're on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me loud and clear?
Now we hear you.
You can. Oh, brilliant. So, Daudi, first of all, really, really fantastic presentation. And a topical one on a day like today. Today's officially International Men's Day. A day to make sure men take care of themselves. So anything to do with, well-being is always a good thing. And I'm particularly impressed that, CX as an organization is actually, encouraging a platform for a topic like this, because, I'm a big believer in the service profit chain, which means that you start with having engaged colleagues. Once you do that, they'll be able to look after the customer. So I'm a firm believer of that. So it's great that, having a topic like this is something which is unexpected, but actually very, very impressive nonetheless. So that's really, really good. So I guess I've got a comment to make, but also a question as well. And the comment just goes, since COVID, particularly in the UK, one thing which I've particularly observed in businesses I've worked with is society have become a bit unkind. I don't know whether COVID has made people be less patient. I don't know what it is, but it's something which I've certainly seen for some data points out there. So, it is where it is. And I know businesses out there are trying to grapple with how can they make sure they create the right climate, which is cultural, but also equip leaders to lead their teams through this transition. So the point you made around leadership is really, really critical, and stuff we talked about around, end of day wrap up, stuff like that, having breaks, using apps out there. There are stuff which I know really, really works. So that's really, really great. So I guess my question is, this is a really, really big topic, and I know all business out there will all have the intention of want to do something. So I just want to know, is there anyone out there who is a real role model? Or what role do you say technology being out there, what role can technology play to really, really help get organizations deal with this better going forward?
All right. Thank you very much, Abdul. I take the question as what role can technology help play to curb this particular challenge? Was that the question?
Yeah, and also who's good? Is there any role model out there that we could learn from your experience?
Okay. Personally, apart from the examples I cited that I had read about online, I have not engaged with individuals that are working in organizations where they have deliberate systems in place to combat compassion fatigue, especially for the frontline staff. In our environment here in Uganda, most of the frontline staff are ideally the lowest paid staff in an organization in many cases. So things like compassion fatigue and things like that, they aren't high up on the agenda for the organization or leadership. So at least in our local environment, I have not interfaced with those organizations that are going out of their way to make sure that this doesn't happen. We just have the generic measures in place, sick leave and things like that. There's an HR person to talk to when you have a challenge, but nothing specifically addressing this case in point. And then regarding the technology, I think as we progress further, AI can help us leverage on this. I'm not sure what the future looks like, but I'm guessing as personalization for customers develops, similarly, personalization for the staff handling customers can also develop. So I'm guessing there will be ways to see how someone is doing from the technological point of view, how frequently they look at the screen and things like that, which over time might make their supervisors say, okay, based on what I'm seeing, you might need to take a break now, even if the person doesn't want to take the break, but there are stats and numbers showing that maybe they have to take a break. That's how I see technology playing a role. And maybe members can share their insights as well, but from my perspective, that's how I see it.
Well, there's another question that was in the chat, and Joan, I've seen your hand. You'll be after that. But there was also some companies are starting to use AI to take away the menial tasks, the unpleasant tasks, to give employees more time. I've seen a beautiful example, what I consider best practice in Booking.com. Most of us probably know that company, the big travel platform, who use a lot of specialized bots that do all the menial stuff. And I saw a beautiful interview with a very happy agent. He's been there for 20 years, and he says, I've never been happier because I don't have time restraints anymore. I don't have an average handling time KPI. I just do about 10, 12 calls a day that are really focusing on the human. But now we come back to your personalization remark. Some agents don't like that. I talk about the automotive. We see some agents say, don't let me do the emotional stuff. Just let me do the 3-minute piece simple calls where somebody asks for an address change and I'm happy. Just let me do that. So personalization is also about knowing your agents' emotional makeup. What do they prefer? And I think you can do a lot with that. Do you have any experience in companies acting on the personality of the agent? That was a question to you, Daudi. Do you know of any companies acting on the personality of the agent when they're looking at?
No. I haven't seen any any of those. What I have seen in terms of acting on the personality of the agent, this is usually at the recruitment stage, where someone's personality, temperament is taken into account prior to being put in these roles. But besides those initial stages, once someone is in the role, I am yet to see personalization being factored in.
I think there's room for improvement there. Joan, you had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk about compassion fatigue at a CX leadership level. I know Daudi has spoken about it at a customer support level, but you find that quite a number of CX leaders actually have teams and units or subsections of the department that are actually customer support. So you find that for many institutions, especially in our economy here in Uganda, you find that there's emotional depletion happening at the CX heads level. And by that, I mean, after everybody has escalated, it all ends with a CX head, yeah? I mean, from the CX support manager, I mean, not CX support manager, but customer service support managers, whether it's a bank and you've got branches, you've got leaders of branches, the CEO, everybody ends up with a CX head eventually. And therefore, you find there's also compassion fatigue going on at that level. So I just wanted to just briefly maybe just point out two things. One, as CX leaders, just being able to maintain your strategic role in guiding the teams and in moving the entire institution. When you focus on the strategic actions, you find that the operational activity does not cause you to experience the emotional burnout or emotional depletion. The other thing, the second bit is really, you talked about boundaries. When you talk about boundaries at customer support, you still may not be able to achieve it entirely, especially if you're dealing with organizations, it's fast-paced corporate institutions where responsiveness is such a big deal. When your phone is off at a point when you're calling out your boundary, you're probably going to be seen as incompetent or you'll be branded something. So it comes down to leaders just being able to call it out during their training sessions and also in their cultural programs. Without cultural programs, and that's where CX comes in to work hand in hand with HR departments, human capital plays a significant role in calling out, setting boundaries. Because if leaders don't have boundaries, I've worked in institutions over 19 years, and during that period, the number of times I say, "Hey guys, it's Saturday. I have a person, I have a leader who is able to handle that." If you're not able to call out your boundary, then you're most definitely going to experience compassion fatigue. So I thought I should just call it out also at CX leadership level. People tend to overlook it, but it does happen as well. Thank you.
I think that's a really important point. I think, well, I can't prove it scientifically yet, but my sense is that CX leaders have the highest rate of burnout across all, because they're constantly having to fight. On the one hand, you only become a CX leader if you are empathic, and all the empathy load ends up with you. And at the same time, you have to try to convince all these other people who are ROI driven or KPI driven to take on some of that empathic load. So yeah, very good point, John. Thank you very much. Dava, you have your hand up. And I think this will probably be the last question because we're slowly nearing the top of the hour.
Yes, so one example, again, of a company that used to be known for how they handled their contact center was Zappos. And again, it's just the kind where, you know, they encourage their agents to have these regular conversations. So, Zappos was known for selling shoes online, but they got to a place where elderly people would call up just because they needed a chat, and Zappos encouraged the agents to have those conversations. So, in a sense, I think it's a form of battling the compassion fatigue by giving favor and meaning to the role beyond just the regular KPIs, and also changing those KPIs. So that's one. And I think you hit on the question that I have, and that is, given the nature, what I find, and you tell me if this is actually true or not, I find that in the hiring of agents for these roles, the job as described is usually not the job that you just described. The job that's described is, you're going to answer some phone calls, you have to learn the systems, normal stuff. I don't think rarely it's the tension of the job is actually expressed, and especially if you work in certain industries. I mean, if you work in insurance, health insurance, or insurance maybe in general, I think possibly you understand that if you work for emergency services, say in a police department or something, and you work in that emergency phone center, you kind of understand that. But if you work in a quote unquote regular business and you haven't worked in that industry before, you may be shocked at the kind of how serious some of these situations are for people and what it means to their lives, and how the stories impact yours. So my question is, have you ever seen in the hiring process the real job explained? And two, do you believe that for where that it's going to have these high pressure or these very compassionate situations, that there should be more of a psychological threshold for people to even be hired into those roles?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alpha. Well, to your point, rarely have I seen a job description clearly state out the activities that tend to happen. Normally, like you said, they make it very beautiful and flowery. Oh, you just pick these 2 phone calls and this and that, and you have this time off. Working under pressure is another added advantage, but they don't really tell you what working under pressure means. And so that's pretty much what it's like. And so you'll find that most people, like you rightly said, they have the technical ability to solve the queries, but might not have the emotional ability to constantly solve the queries at the frequency at which they are coming. And that in turn leads to what we're discussing here today. So I'm technically sound, but psychologically I'm not being aided in the way that I should be to keep up with the demand that's coming, and that's where we drop the ball. So to your first question, I have not seen that come out very clearly, and I'm actually curious as to what that would look like on paper, because it might deter people from taking on that particular role in the first place. And then your second question was, I think, to do with at the beginning point, what do you look out for? Are there some psychological things you can look out for, or habits that you can, not habits, but abilities to the role that you can filter out before someone takes this on? And I think you definitely can. Sometimes I believe there are tests out there that can be done to particularly understand the psyche of the person being hired, and also, like you said, an open explanation of what the role is to this person that you're hiring can also help you assess whether or not they can handle the demands of this particular job. But I think the overall conversation today is to try and reduce the irrational demands of such jobs, so that everyone's well-being is looked after, not just saying let's look for the tough guys and put them in there and hope for the best. Yeah.
I think the fact how long the discussion went and how many questions there were is an indication of how interesting this topic is to all of us CX leaders. So thank you very, very much, Dowdy, to bringing it up. Thank you all for participating and all your questions, and hope to see you soon in the next webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dowdy. Thank you, Stefan. Bye.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, everyone.